Hello, hello everyone. Happy Global Accessibility Awareness Day. Welcome to another stream, and today we're doing something a little special to celebrate the equation. The equation? Oh, the occasion. We are doing some Global Accessibility Awareness Day Q&A. Ask a blind accessibility service. Ask a blind accessibility specialist any questions that you would like to. And if you don't have any questions, that's okay. I've got some pre-prepared, but I want to go and make this as interactive as possible. So that's kind of what we're doing today. And I'm super excited. If you guys are in the chat, go ahead and give an introduction about yourself. Say how you're doing today. Say where you're from. Just say something about yourself so I know who's around. Of course, if you have questions now, I'd love to take those. But I'm super excited. I decided to do this event last minute because I'm like, well, I want to do something for GAD because everybody's doing something for GAD. So why not add to the GAD train? So I decided to go ahead and make my own event at the last minute. So let's go ahead and I'm going to start with my prepared questions here. And if you guys have any questions, then go ahead and throw them in the chat. Okay, let's see. Let me here. Hold on, I'm just making sure that things went through. Yep. All right. So I want to start with some of my questions. So, okay, first question I have is, how do you stream? I know, that's like, what the heck? How do you stream? Well, the way I stream is I use Zoom, and I go ahead and use Restream, which is free, and that helps me to be able to live stream to YouTube and Twitch. Now you're thinking, but Taylor, you're blind. How the heck are you reading chats? And there was one that just came through, right? So what I do is I use Restream Chat. It's for Windows, and there's a setting in there under notification settings that you can have the chat read to you. So what it's doing is it's using something called TTS, text to speech, and it's reading everything aloud as I am streaming. So like someone just put a chat message and it read who it was from. But speaking of the chat message, let's do that right now. So we have got, hold on a second. Okay. Kuchakil, I don't want to pronounce your name wrong. Hello, I'm from the Netherlands. Well, welcome to the stream. I'm super excited that you're here. And yeah, I'm excited that everybody is here today. And happy GAD. If you don't know what GAD is, well, I'm going to talk about that in just a minute because guess what? The next question is, what is GAD? Right? What is it? Everybody's talking about it. Or maybe I'm the only one talking about it and you're just hearing it for the first time. That's okay. So GAD stands for Global Accessibility Awareness Day. And it started in 2012. It helps to raise awareness for global accessibility around the world in terms of helping to make the web a more accessible place. There's over 100 events every year, and there is a page. It's called accessibility.day. You can see all the events that are happening and even the event that my employer hosts. So you guys should go support me. I've heard that the website for registering is not that accessible, but we'll figure that out later. So if you have any issues, let me know and I will pass that on to my employer. But I am doing a panel on AI and accessibility. So if you want to hear about that, then please register. I'll put the link in the chat in just a minute. And if you want to know more about accessibility, there are more great events that I attended today. And so I will be putting links once this stream is over. So stay tuned, and I will be posting more on social media as the day progresses. So GAD, or Global Accessibility Awareness Day, in summary, helps to raise awareness for accessibility around the world. And it doesn't even mean like blindness accessibility. It means accessibility for everyone, just general web accessibility. So that is what GAD is, and I'm super excited that it's here. And that's May 16th, and that's normally the third Wednesday. Sorry, not Wednesday. What the heck is my brain thinking? Thursday in May. So that's kind of how that starts out. Now, let's see here. I keep moving back and forth because I want to make sure my stuff's working. So, we already talked about what GAD is. Now, we're going to talk about what a couple other things are that I usually get from time to time. What is an accessibility overlay? This is a question I get all the time. And should I use it? Well, the answer is no, and absolutely not. Let me explain. An accessibility overlay is a piece of software that claims to make your website 100% accessible within like one line of JavaScript code. Now, if you're thinking to me, well, Taylor, that sounds great. I'll just pay $49 a month and my website will always be accessible. Well, unfortunately, I hate to break your bubble, but that's not how the world works. You see, when you add one of these overlay solutions, it's automated. And sometimes they fail. Actually, not sometimes. A lot of the times they fail. And what happens is they basically make the website worse for the end user. But you're like, well, it's supposed to help. Well, unfortunately, the vendors were not smart enough to talk to blind users and actually be like, could this be a valuable thing for you? Instead, they decided to use their entrepreneurial selves and create these companies. Now, I'm not saying that I'm fully against overlays, and I'll talk about why in a minute. However, I'm fully against overlays in their current form and their current marketing schemes. Just to say that it can fix 100% of issues within one line of JavaScript code, no. How about it can make 100 more issues with one line of JavaScript code that weren't there in the first place? So I have a true story. So I lived at an apartment complex in Michigan, and this apartment complex used overlays on their website. And one month I needed to pay rent, of course, right? It's first of the month I want to pay rent. There's an accessibility overlay on this site. Well, guess what, folks? The apartment complex did not get their money until they removed it. So here's what happened. The website was so unusable that I couldn't use it. And so what happened was I had to go tell the apartment manager, be like, hey, you want your rent this month, right? I think you want your rent. So you have an overlay on your website that makes it completely unusable. And I mean, it was so bad. I couldn't even navigate it. Half the things weren't even accessible via keyboard. It was terrible. So long story short, if you want to not be like my landlord, how about you don't add overlays to your site and you don't make it worse, right? Because you can learn this lesson the hard way, or you can believe someone like me who's an accessibility specialist for over 6 years. Trust me, I've dealt with this before. I know what happens. I know how this goes. It's very, very common, and you don't want to fall into the overlay trap, as I call it. Well, but you're thinking, great, but how do I make my website accessible, right? That's the next question I get. I have limited budget, limited funding. Okay, great. Well, that's awesome. You know, limited funding, you can make your accessible site very, very quickly. The thing you have to realize is you don't need a ginormous budget to make your website accessible. That is not true. So first thing you do is you test your website with screen readers. Now, a screen reader is what I use every day for my website, and actually that's how I stream, right? A screen reader reads me the chat messages. It reads me how many people are watching my stream right now. It reads me my emails. Basically, I can't see enough. That's why I use a screen reader. And how it works is it speaks everything on the screen, including your unlabeled images, which I'll talk about in a minute. It speaks everything on the screen, and basically that's how I use my computer. And of course I use it at super speeds, right? Because I need to keep up with my colleagues who are super visual speed racers. And you know, that's a little bit about how I use a screen reader, and I can do a demonstration if you guys want to, so put that in chat if you want a demo, because I am more than willing to do a demo. Just put that in chat so I know. And yeah, a screen reader basically will allow me to use a computer. Without a screen reader, I can't use a computer, right? So there are a few screen readers on the market today. There is NVDA, non-visual desktop access. Pros, it's free. Cons, well, some government offices still don't like it. They haven't caught on to the trend because it's open source. Open source means that anyone can modify the source code. It's a community-driven project. Great for innovation, not for security. Although, honestly, it's very secure, and so that mentality really needs to go away. I know I'm speaking to the choir here, but yeah, we need to get NVDA adopted more places. In fact, I use NVDA all the time because it's free and I can demo with people and they don't have to pay a bunch of money. Now, here's the other option. It's called JAWS, Job Access with Speech. Now, we always claim that JAWS has a lot of flaws, so anyway, I'll talk about that later. But JAWS is another screen reader, and it's made by a company called, I think they're called Vispero. They were called Freedom Scientific. They change names every other week, it seems like, folks. And JAWS is a screen reader that is the most popular. Now, I don't know why it should be, because it's terrible, in my opinion. If you guys are blind and you are in chat or even watching afterwards, like, put a remark in chat or in the comments. Do you think that JAWS is terrible? Because I do. Let's start some conversation. JAWS is absolutely terrible because it just does not work all that great for a lot of things. Now, it's funny because a lot of my friends, we always call it flaws, right? Because it has so many flaws. But anyway, JAWS is the most popular screen reader out there right now. And that's what governments and enterprises use. So, if you're just that one developer who's like, but I don't have a $12,000 budget. I mean, I'm exaggerating, okay, but maybe like $1,200 budget if you want the commercial version. Well, that's okay. Use NVDA to test with a screen reader. So that's number one. Use NVDA to test with a screen reader. Now, if you're like, I don't know how to use a screen reader, well, if you want to learn to use a screen reader, I actually have a training for that. So you can email me at taylor@taylorarndt.com, and I actually have a training that I offer for clients if you want to learn to use a screen reader. I am a native screen reader user, and I've been blind since birth, so I could teach you exactly how to use a screen reader so that you can test the most effectively. All right, so that's number one. It's really pretty cheap. It's about $35 an hour, so $35 a session, and I think that you guys will get a lot out of it. Okay, now, you're like, okay, I've tested with a screen reader, but what do I do now? Well, there's a lot of things you need to do. The next step I'd probably recommend is if you're so not sure what to do, and then what you could do is you could go ahead and basically get an accessibility audit. Now, an accessibility audit is where a professional practitioner like myself, again, there's others, but the thing is, they're really expensive. So if you want to spend a whole bunch of money you got at the casino one day, and you're like, I got a whole bunch of money, well, you can go spend it on the big companies. But that's okay. I have some audits are cheaper. Okay, then we have a couple chat messages, but before I get to those chat messages, I want to talk about the third step. And the third step is, after you get the accessibility audit done by a professional practitioner, now a couple things with that audit, you want to make sure that you want to make sure that practitioner meets a few criteria, and I'm going to lay them out here. So one, they are disability focused. So what does that mean? That they have a lot of staff with disabilities. Would you hate to go get a audit and realize that nobody that was auditing your site was disabled? Wouldn't that suck? Yeah, it would. You don't want that, do you? So here's what you do. You look for a company or a independent consultant like myself who actually lives with a disability, because that's the thing that you want to keep in mind here, is that they need to live with a disability, because that's the most authentic experience you're going to get, all right? So that's the most authentic experience you're going to get, is someone who lives with a disability. Now, okay, you figured out your accessibility testing company. All right, here are the questions that I would ask them. One, what is your testing process? All right, how do they test? If they're like, oh, we just do this and this and this and all this other stuff, and it seems a little shorthanded, red flag number one. Two, do they employ people with disabilities? Always ask that question because you want to see who's going to be testing your website. Number two. Three, how are your reports generated? All right, just are they like Excel, or are they in an interactive platform? I personally use Asana for all my clients so we can communicate, but that may matter depending on how you want your reports generated. Four, what standards are they going to use? So in web accessibility, there are different standards. We have Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG, and it's 2.2 that's out right now. If you're a government vendor, then you will want to do Section 508, and also that complies with WCAG 2.1. Sorry, that goes along with. If you are not a government and you're not sure where to go, well, what I would say is if you're a private business, let's say you're a mom and pop shop, great. We want to future-proof you, so I would recommend going through WCAG 2.2. But if you're like, what the heck are all these terms? Well, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines was made by W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium, if I can say that word correctly. And right now we're currently on 2.2, and there's all these different guidelines about how the web should be accessible, like headings and labels should be labeled, etc., etc., etc. So this is how the auditors will audit your website. They will look at these guidelines and determine if your pages pass. Okay, well that sounds great. But here's a couple of other things you want to keep in mind. Price. Obviously, that's obvious. You want to make sure that your website auditing company is not going to go bankrupt or bankrupt you because of the price, right? What I mean is that you don't want your website accessibility company to bankrupt your bank account. So got to make sure about that. Do they offer bells and, try that again. Do they offer bells and whistles that you probably don't need? Well, that's happens with a lot of these companies, right? So you want to make sure that it's a company that fits your size. You wouldn't want to go with a huge company if you're just a one-person shop, unless you have that money. And I'm talking about over $20,000, all right? So I'm sure you didn't go to the casino and get rich that one day. I'm just saying the casino because I'm trying to make a point here. All right, number 3, 4, whatever we're at here. You want to make sure the timeline. So if you're expecting one thing, but the auditing company's like, it can be done in 2 months, but you need it done in 1, that's another red flag that you're like, maybe I should look for somebody else, all right? Another one is legal compliance. Chances are if you're wanting an audit or you need an audit, it's because you got sued. If it's not, great. Number 1 thing you should do is if you want to prevent being sued, get an audit and then get a statement from an accessibility vendor. But I'm sure that 90% of you watching this video probably got sued. And so what you need to do is you need to find a vendor who has good legal compliance. And I've got a lot of vendors that I recommend. I can help with this. There's Fedora Outlier LLC, Digital Accessibility by WeCo, all these different vendors that can help with the legal aspect. And of course, if you need an expert witness and things like that. Okay, now finally, you want to look for companies that will help with the remediation. So what is remediation? Well, remediation basically entails the process of fixing issues, right? So you're remediating issues. Now, what does that look like? You're helping to fix the issues that were audited. And so a lot of companies, what they will do is they could either help you with the remediation like I can. This usually involves like a dev team. So say if you're a solo operation and I'm like, I don't have time for all this remediation stuff. That's okay. Well, you can get one of the vendors to help you with the remediation and their dev team can help you do it. Or if you're like, I just want to do the remediation myself, great. That's totally fine. And then what will happen from there is your company that you work with should, I say should, they really need to, help test your website again and do what's called QA, so quality assurance. Now, quality assurance basically means to test the issues that were found in the audit and make sure that they're fixed. So what happens then, especially in my company, after all the issues are fixed, I issue like an accessibility statement saying that, hey, this has been accessible, it's been proven accessible, and the company, Taylor Arndt, blah, 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 like it's been tested with people with disabilities and yada, yada, yada. It's a bunch of legal jargon. Now, the thing is that, you want to make sure that if there's huge issues that could impact your ability, especially if you got sued, you'll want to definitely have an open communication with your legal counsel. All right, so that's a very important thing too, is your legal counsel make sure that everything is good there. All right, now the last thing I will say is, here's the last criteria. You want to make sure that everything comes together and the support. So what that means is, after my audit, I want to make sure that my website stays compliant. A good vendor will make sure that you have monitoring every 6 months to a year. I prefer 6 months. Make sure that it actually stays compliant and update your accessibility statement. Those are all of the good components of a good accessibility vendor. If you're having trouble finding vendors, go ahead and reach out to me and I can help you find the best vendor for your needs, or I can do it myself as an accessibility tester with over 6 years in the experience. and I would love to help you make your website more accessible. Okay, let's go ahead and answer some chat messages. I got a few of these here. Let me go back to restream here. All right, so let's see. We have, hold on a second. Let me look at my chat messages. All right, so hold on a second. We have, let's see, hold on. Okay. So I'm just going to start with, hey, Taylor, this is Christian. Do you happen to know if it's possible for me to write a new Eloquence TTS engine for Android since it's not on the Play Store anymore? Christian, I'm sorry to tell you, I don't know how to do that. That is not in my expertise. Okay. Unmute says, I find to be more productive with JAWS than I do NVDA, but it could be I don't know how to use NVDA. Yeah, Unmute, everybody has their opinion, and that's kind of what I like to emphasize, is that everybody has their opinion, but this is kind of what I think, right, as somebody with a disability who does accessibility, because oftentimes it is actually great to test with both screen readers, if you can. All right, that's something very important as well. So, if you can test with both, now you're not forced to, especially if the money is a huge issue. But if you're an accessibility tester, that's what I'm saying. Now, if you're a screen reader user like myself, yes, everybody has their own preferences. All right, if you guys are in chat, say hi, ask questions. I've got a couple of mine that I'll go through again. But I want to hear you guys. What are your guys' thoughts on accessibility? How are you having a good GAD? Just kind of let me know your thoughts. And if you like this stream, go ahead and subscribe and follow and ring the notification bell and do all those things. All right. Another question I have is, I don't want to get sued. What do I do? Well, that's a good question. So, that's right. You don't want to get sued. Trust me, I don't want to get sued. I'm sure you don't want to get sued. No one wants to get sued. So what I'd recommend is first, with all of the ADA lawsuits going around right now, a lot of them are what are called frivolous lawsuits. Now, frivolous basically means that these lawyers are hiring, that's right, they're hiring blind people like myself to act as what are called plaintiffs, basically the people who are trying to sue the businesses, and they're acting as plaintiffs and basically putting their names on the lawsuits. But you're thinking, well, Taylor, are you one of these blind plaintiffs who are suing hundreds of businesses at a time? No, I am not a plaintiff on millions of accessibility lawsuits, all right? I mean millions, I'm not really exaggerating, kind of. But what I'm saying is you want to make sure that you make your website accessible before you get sued. All right, so that's number one. If you think you're going to get sued, start now. Make sure you make your website accessible. Now, the same applies to talking about choosing an accessibility vendor. All right, you want to choose a good accessibility vendor that will help you to make sure you don't get sued and defend in case you do. All right, so you want to do that. But then you also want to take preventative measures to make sure you don't get sued. Now, those include, you want to do some more like UX testing. So UX testing is user experience testing. And what this is basically you're helping to give your feedback on different pages and things. So instead of looking at your compliance angle, you're looking at how usable this is for a user, right? So usability and accessibility are definitely different. Usability is basically where you're making sure that it is usable for the user. And accessibility and compliance is basically where you're making sure it's compliant with the guidelines, compliant with the standards. And so you want to make sure that it's both usable and accessible. That's kind of my number one rule. And then you also want to make sure that you keep up the monitorings and you do all that kind of things. And then the vendor would step in if you got sued. All right. My best advice and the cost effectiveness is start accessibility now, not when you get sued. Because an average accessibility lawsuit could cost over $15,000. Now, I will make this disclaimer. I am not a lawyer, so don't try to go ask me with legal questions because I am not qualified for that. However, if you need a good lawyer, I have a good recommendations. But I'm just going to say this right now. I am not a lawyer, so don't try to ask me legal questions. I am just giving based, advice for accessibility stuff. Okay. So we talked about how to not get sued. That's a question I always get. Now, Again, what if you just got sued? What do you do? That's a good question. So let's say, you just got a demand letter from this frivolous lawsuit, and, well, you don't know if it's frivolous, but you got a demand letter and you're like, oh my God, my website's not accessible. I'm a mom and pop shop. What do I do? Because I want $15,000. Okay. I know. You're thinking, but I don't want to lose money and I don't want to go out of business. No. Here's the thing. You're not going to go out of business. What you need to do is you need to take the following steps as soon as possible. So this is not something you can wait on, not something you can, deal with in 2 months, because they're going to try to get the case and try to make you forfeit the case. But here's what you do. 1, you need to find a good accessibility vendor. So if you don't already know how to do that, watch my previous segment. You need to find a good accessibility vendor. 2, first you need to find a lawyer. Don't try to defend this on your own. I mean, you can, but don't try to defend this on your own. 2, find a good accessibility vendor. 3, work with that accessibility vendor and have the lawyer and the accessibility vendor coordinate. That is basically my step framework on how to handle if you get sued. Of course, you want to tell your lawyer ASAP, and then maybe your lawyer will have accessibility vendor recommendations, okay? Now, depending on the scope and the cost, you could look at those recommendations, but also I will have some recommendations as well, or even I can help you with that too. I have been dealing with all these legal accessibility cases for a very long time, and I can help you make sure that your website is accessible and you don't have to try to fork up $15,000. Because who wants to do that? All right, so let's see what else, other questions. I don't think I have anything in chat. Okay. I'm just checking my time. All right, so let's see. I'm checking my chat real quick. All right, I don't think I have anything on. Okay, so like I said, if anybody is just joining me, please, if you have questions or want to know about something, put it in the chat, and let's try to get the conversation going. All right, so again, I'm just doing my segments, but your questions take priority. All right. Okay, what's the next question I have? I'm a WordPress site owner. How do I make my website accessible? So these are all questions that I've came up with and that I've saw on Mastodon. So, WordPress site owner, great, that's awesome. I love WordPress. Now, one thing to note is that WordPress is fully accessible out of the box. It's just depending on what plugins and themes and stuff you add to it will depend on how inaccessible it is, all right? So, for example, if you add Elementor to your site, well, it may not be accessible, all right? Because Elementor is a page builder and it's not that accessible. It's okay, it's getting better, but it's not that great. However, if you use accessible plugins and accessible themes, so themes help add visual appeal and make the styling, and plugins help to add more behavior to your site and change the functionality. If you add accessible plugins and accessible themes, your website will be fully WCAG compliant, or Section 508, or other standards. But you're like, what plugins should I use? Well, I'm going to go through it. So, here are my favorite plugins that I use. Now, this is not an exhaustive list, so just be aware. For my theme, I usually use GeneratePress. It runs for about $60 USD per year, I believe, and it is a great theme. So GeneratePress is amazing. It is fully accessible on the front and back end, because that's one of my criteria. So that's number 1. Number 2, for a plugin, if you want forms, go with Gravity Forms. That's my most accessible recommendation. I will note on the back end it is a little bit weird. If you are blind and you need to reorder form fields, at the time of this recording you cannot. You have to use my plugin, which is on Techopolis, TECHOPOLIS.online, and it sells for $100. It is a WordPress plugin to help make Gravity Forms reordering fields accessible. So that's number 1. Gravity Forms is very accessible. It can run pretty pricey, but I would check prices. If you need an alternative, WP Forms, but I don't really recommend that, right? Just because I don't really use that as much. Okay, so forms we covered. Now let's say you want to use like maps and things. So maps are interesting. I would say probably oh gosh, I don't even know, like a Mapbox plugin, like for Google Maps, but you also want to have a description of that map if possible. So maps are a little bit harder. That's why I put it here. And then if you want to have like a, I don't know, file upload thing, you can do that with Gravity Forms, or even a support ticket thing, Gravity Forms. Now there are certain settings you need to throw on Gravity Forms, like autocomplete attributes and things like that. And it'll kind of walk you through it. There's other videos about Gravity Forms. Let's see, what other functionality? Or if you want to add some slideshows, I believe there's like one called WP Slideshow. I have to look up the exact name. But they said it was fully accessible, so I'll put more information about that later. And the other thing is too, if you're like, I don't know what plugins are accessible, because I went through a very small list due to time, there's a group, the WordPress Accessibility group on Facebook is a great place to ask for recommendations. Because there's no chance in like trying to test website plugins over and over, and half of them are not accessible. For a calendar plugin, choose My Calendar. It's written by Joe Dolson. He's one of my great friends in the accessibility industry, so check that out. I don't think I have any other options that I can think of right now, but if you have any other thoughts on WordPress stuff, put that in the chat and put questions in the chat. So that's definitely really important too, is WordPress. Alright, so the next thing is, after that, plugins and themes, really making sure that the text that you write on your site, like headings and things, are accessible. So images need to have alternative text. If you're having trouble with alternative text, there's a great vendor I recommend. It's called Scribely, and they can help you to write alternative text that works very well. So check out them. And if you need help with testing your WordPress website, I could do that as well. Or if you want more of a bigger company, check out Equalize Digital. But I can do that as well, and I tend to work with them a lot. So yeah, that's kind of how that goes. If you want to learn more about WordPress and have a meetup about it, there is an Equalize Digital WordPress meetup. It's on meetup.com, so check that out. So there's a whole bunch of resources relating to WordPress, and it's all about figuring out the best option for you. But again, there's a lot more to do with WordPress. I could do an entire stream about it, but due to all the questions I have, I need to kind of cut it short. All right, let's see what else we have. You guys are awful quiet in chat. What do you guys have? Do you have anything? Well, I'm making sure I don't have anything on Mastodon. I don't think I have anything on Mastodon. Okay. Let's see. So, what other question? Let's see. Another one I have is, how do I make my forms accessible? So, forms are an interesting topic. So, forms help you to make website interactive, right? You can submit contact forms and things like that. So the first thing I'd recommend is I will make sure my fields are labeled. So if you're doing this by hand, you'll want to make sure that the ID attribute matches the for attribute. So it'll be like less label, for equals blah 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 blah, greater, it'll be a longer video. And then you want to make sure that your ID of the field matches what's in the for, and that way it will associate with a screen reader. So that's very important. I could do an example of all these later, but yeah, definitely with labels and form fields. You also want to make sure that there's a field set and legend. That way it tells what the user needs to enter. You also want to make sure that the required fields are highlighted as such, so they're like an asterisk. A lot of form plugins, especially Gravity Forms, will be like all fields marked with a star are required, so make sure, don't try to get rid of it like some people do. Make sure you keep that because that is necessary for accessibility. Make sure that if you have headings between sections, if they're in logical order, I'll be talking about headings in the next section. Make sure that your forms have accessible like checkboxes, again with labels and things like that. And if you use images, make sure that they have alternative text, like I talked about last time, and the other section. So let's see, other things with forms. Make sure that your form, when you submit it, if it like refreshes on, if the user doesn't know it, it will give some screen reader text saying, hey, upon pressing this button, the form will refresh or something. Or better yet, just use Ajax. make sure that if you have drop downs and you're going to be selecting an option again that it doesn't refresh on change of context, or else again use Ajax. So Ajax is pretty important to make sure that it doesn't refresh without the user knowing, because that's actually a violation. Also, let's see what other things here. Labels, headings. I mean, those are basically the big things with forms. Don't use layout tables. That's big. Don't use those. Not helpful. What else? I don't think I have anything else there. So yeah, forms. Any questions in the chat? You guys are really quiet. You guys must be enjoying your GAD and not having anything. I must be doing a great job. So yeah, let me know what you guys think in chat. Let's see. Yeah, I think those are all the forms items that I want to primarily talk about. Basically, forms are hard if you don't know what you're doing, but you can definitely make forms accessible. So the next item on my little list in my head is headings. Headings, what are they? Well, they are a way to separate sections of text and content. Now, what you need to know about them is, number one, don't think that if you're a designer, they're like your designer's toolbox. Well, what does that mean? That's very vague. Make sure that when you're using headings, you're actually using headings. Don't do what I call fake headings. Now, what are fake headings? Fake headings are basically when you go from like a H1 to an H4, like illogical headings. But what I mean by that is don't use headings as your bold indicator. All right, so don't use headings instead of bold. Headings are not supposed to be your bold indicator. Not at all. You want to make sure that headings actually are headings. Headings are headings are headings. Don't make them do anything else. Now, in terms of heading order and levels, you want to make sure that your page always has a heading level 1, because as accessibility testers, we will mark you down. You want to make sure that then you have a heading level 2. It's like an outline in a book, right? So if you're writing a book or a research paper, heading 1, heading 2, and then under that you can have like, subtopic heading 2, and then topics under that heading 3, and just go down, 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 forward. What I don't want you to do is start from heading level 1, then go to 5, then go to 3, then go to 4, then go to 2, then go to 6. No. We're not playing that game around here, and if you want to play that game, great, but that's a great way to get flagged for accessibility issues for headings. So instead, I need you to do the more logical path. Now, another thing I see with headings is that people use headings and they put them in paragraphs. So what do I mean? Well, it basically says, I don't know, the whole thing reads as a heading like heading level 2, this is a test, and I want to see if this is a heading. This heading is very long, but that's for a reason. Please don't make this ever a heading again. So what I mean is that this heading is basically spanning multiple lines, and the screen reader is reading the entire thing as a heading. Why do we not do this? Well, if we do this, then it's going to make heading navigation for screen reader users virtually useless, because there's too many headings on the page, and the user will not be able to figure out what's what. So don't do that, please. That would be very terrible. Instead, do headings where they're supposed to be done. All right, so that's kind of more what I have about headings, heading levels, things like that. Headings are very important, and they are one of the most common accessibility issues I see on a daily basis testing websites. All right, do we have anything in chat? What is my chat saying? I don't think it's very active. Let me see if I have any chats. No, I don't think I have any chats. Okay. All right, let's see what other things I haven't checked in Twitch. All right, nothing there. So let's talk about a couple other items that I see. Tables. Okay, so tables are very interesting. Number one, don't use tables like you would be doing them for layout. Layout tables are a fad of the 90s. We don't use them now, all right? Don't use layout tables, just don't do it. Number two, don't use tables that are not marked up. So what I mean is that each header of the table should have less th greater, like as a row header. That way it's a header cell, and that way it'll read with screen readers. Right? There are plenty of tables that don't read with screen readers properly, and that's just not good. So really the big thing with tables is you got to make sure the headers are defined properly. And that's, basically what I have. The other thing, too, is that you got to make sure that you don't put random tables that have one row and one column when you really just could make it a list or a paragraph. And if you're going to be doing like a graph, that may be better suited as a table, depending on the context. All right? Now, one thing I will say is that accessibility is very, very subjective, and everybody has opinions. And so I try to give the best opinion slash like fact that I can. But I just want to make sure that you guys know that accessibility can sometimes be left up to interpretation. All right, that's kind of very important. Okay, so let's see what other things I have going on here. Headings, tables, lists. Okay, great. So I talked about that. I kind of want to talk more another thing about government contracts. So what if your company is going to be selling to the government? Well, first I'd say congratulations. I'm very happy that you're going to be selling to the government. But there's a couple things that you need to do. Number one, you need to have a VPAT. What is a VPAT? Well, it's a voluntary product accessibility template. And what it does is it helps you to make your website compliant. Sorry, no, let me try that again. A VPAT helps you to ensure that the government, when they try to procure your software, can see your commitment to accessibility and can see maybe where your accessibility lacks. Look, these government agencies don't have millions of hours to test all these websites that they're going to procure. So instead of using testing and trying to do all that again, they just use a VPAT. So what some companies will do, I don't recommend this, is they will actually lie on their VPAT saying supported, right? Because there's different categories you could do. And they will try to lie on their VPAT. Guys, don't do that, because if you do, there might be red flags, right? Instead, you want to be honest about your company. Be like, hey, this is not right yet, or da-da-da-da-da. You need to make sure that you do that. And if you have multiple testers working on your VPAT, for the love of all things, make sure that the testers agree, because that could just confuse people more. So that's something that I've seen in my career when I read VPATs. And just don't do that. The other thing is make sure that your VPAT is accessible. You're thinking, well, Taylor, a VPAT always has to be accessible, right? Well, y'all, somehow you made it inaccessible. I know, right? You're like, how did I make this inaccessible? Well, I didn't make it inaccessible, you did. So there are times where VPATs are not accessible because of PDF tagging, because normally they're in PDFs or random crap like that. So, long story short, if you need to make your VPAT accessible, you might want to get some professional help with that, because you want to make sure that your VPAT's accessible, or that could be a red flag when you're trying to get government contracts. And also, VPATs could be used in the private sector as well, just for procurement and things, but often it's used in the public sector for procurements in the government. All right, so make sure if you're going to sell to the government, you make sure your product is accessible, because the government, by law, have to make their stuff accessible under Section 508. And, of course, WCAG. But Section 508 is their thing. Okay. Let's see. I need chat messages. You guys are quiet. You guys must love what I'm saying. Let's see. I guess the other thing that I was going to talk about here is talk about lists. So lists are really important when you go and talk about accessibility, because lists help you to make sure that if something is supposed to be like structurally, like for example, if it's a list of fruits, you want to put it in a list. Now there's different types of lists. There's ordered and unordered lists. And so ordered lists start with OL, like ordered, OL. And then there's unordered lists, which is UL. And so if you're doing like a list of fruits, maybe you want to do a UL. And if you're doing a list of like a recipe, do an OL. Now, why does this matter? Well, lists help to be able to navigate between different lists, right? So if I press L with my screen reader, I can actually navigate between all the lists on the page. Same with H and all that stuff for headings. Long story short, if you add these semantic HTML5 elements that everybody should be using, then you're making your website easy to use, also easier for search engines, and making sure it's compliant so screen readers can get the information they need. Very, very important. So make sure that you use lists properly. I mean, I don't have anything else to say with that. I guess the next thing that leads into this, though, is the skip to main content link. Again, very helpful. You want to make sure that that's present. You want to make sure that the skip to main content link actually skips people to the main content, not just skip somewhere in the nav. Basically, a skip to main content link will skip screen reader users and keyboard users all the way down past the header, past all that crap, down to the main content. So very easy for jumping to the correct part of the page. All right? But you got to make sure that that's accessible. You also have to make sure it's the first element on the page. Right? Got to make sure it's the first element on the page. Okay. What else do I have? Yeah, so script main content links, pretty important. Very, very essential. I guess the next thing with that would be like markup. So markup of your headings. We talked about links. We talked about lists. Well, we actually do need to talk about some links and stuff. But your headings and your lists, make sure that that's marked up properly. Just generally make sure that your structure of your page is marked up and not just using like all paragraphs if it's supposed to be like a heading or bold and things like that. So that's kind of what I have about that little section about skip to main content / markup. Okay, so let's see, what else do I want to talk about? I'm trying to think of what else I should talk about. I guess, you know what, I'm going to talk about alt text for a second. So I talked about that earlier, but I just want to recap about it. So alt text, alternative text, it helps people with blindness or even using non-image browsers to be able to read the web and see what images there are. Now, I was saying yesterday, if you watched my Google I/O stream, that you should not stop making alt text. So you really should not stop making alt text because alt text helps browsers and helps users to understand what's in an image. So here are some things you should not do. Number one, have an alt text that literally says, I don't know, my house. Very descriptive. That. Number two, worse than that, you want to make sure the alt text doesn't say file 12345.jpg. Terrible. What does that tell the user? I don't know, it tells it where the file's on the server, but does that give any value? Heck no. So you want to make sure that you tell the user what's going on. So you could say like, a woman sitting down at a computer and is looking up at a camera, streaming, right? Or not really streaming, but, looking up at a camera, right? Or you could, even say about like what I'm wearing, like, a woman looking nice with like green, use more color. Sitting in front of a computer on a Zoom meeting, things like that, with the YouTube window open. All right, so just random things like that. You want to be descriptive. You don't want to be too long, but yet you want to have a delicate balance. For logos, I recommend saying like Techopolis logo, right? That way you say, okay, this is a logo, and that way you're very descriptive. Techopolis is another place I work at, so I just use that as an example. So Techopolis logo. Or if you're doing like headshots, you could just say, I don't know, Taylor standing up, about ready to leave. I just made up random crap. Or Taylor sitting down at a panel, which I'm going to be doing later today, talking to the audience. Right, so if you're trying to get my panel. Now, a lot of people don't use headshots properly. Sorry, alt text. I don't know where headshots came from. A lot of people don't use alt text properly, and they just say random crap. Don't do that because it actually makes it worse for users. It also makes it worse for Google to search your site. So use alt text properly. If you need help writing alt text, again, I can help as well, so reach out, or Scribely is a great vendor as well. All right, chat, you guys are really quiet. Come on. What else do we got? Let me check, make sure. You guys are quiet. All right. Let's see. I'm going to kind of take a little thing here. If you guys are not subscribed to my channel, I would appreciate it. I'm trying to get to 700 subscribers, so please go ahead and do that. If you're on Twitch, I'm trying to get up to 50 followers, and I would love your follow as well. So let's try that support so that I can do more of what I love and teach you guys accessibility. Okay. What other things should I talk about? I'm kind of waiting for you guys to ask some questions. I mean, I could talk about other things. I'm just trying to think about what you guys want to hear about. Because I kind of did the big, deep dive into accessibility, all the different concepts and things. So, yeah, what are you guys wanting me to talk about? Because I did like the deep dive. I mean, there are a couple other things to talk about, like inaccessible websites and how to test your website. Actually, let me talk about one more thing real quick. How to test your website yourself. Pretty important. So first thing you could do is use a screen reader like I already talked about. There's a web aim contrast checker. And it will be very awesome. Okay, so what we want to do there is we want to make sure that your brand, let me try that again, I got distracted. So yeah, make sure that you use a screen reader, and also, honestly, hire a tester with a disability. But if you're thinking, oh my god, that's too expensive for my shoestring budget, you don't need to bring them on full time. Use someone like me who you could pay by the hour, right? And that way you could use someone who actually lives with a disability. Okay, yeah, let's talk about that later. Okay, yeah, let's talk about that later. Again, please don't promote on this stream, because all you're doing is making TTS crash. Okay, yeah, that's one thing too. Don't, if you're gonna make promotional comments, make sure they're accessible and don't try to crash the TTS system. All right, because I'm blind and that's just really annoying. And since we're talking about Accessibility Day, yeah, don't do that, please. Okay. Let's see. I'm just trying to think about what other things you guys want to talk about. I mean, I appreciate the chat message, but yeah. Let's see. I think, if you guys don't have any other questions, I hope you guys have a wonderful GAAD. I'm going to stick around in case I think of something else. But I had a lot of questions, but I'm hoping that you guys can think of some other ones too. And if you can't, that's okay. But I hope that you learned a lot from this stream. And I hope that you were able to get some insight into basics of accessibility. Now, this is not everything, but this is at least the basics. I just want to make one note. If you're international, there are different accessibility laws per different standards and regions, but this was mainly for the US. So just keep that in mind as well as what you would like to, work on. So there's different things for the EU and Canada, and if I were to do all that, that would take me hours. There's also now state laws for accessibility, so along with the WCAG, Section 508, etc., there are other laws for different states. And yes, there are different laws for, there's different laws depending on what jurisdiction you're in. Depending on where you're at, for example, California and Texas do have different laws for the states, so always check your state laws too if you want to be accessible. Well, you need to be accessible, but if you need to be accessible, especially with government, you want to check all the laws. Okay, again, I really would appreciate you not trying to promote in front of my stream. If you have something meaningful to say, I would like to hear it, but I understand you have graphic stuff, and I personally would like to not have that right now. So please don't try to promote in front of my stream. I appreciate it. All right. I think, guys, I'm getting overruled by spammers, which, by the way, are not accessible. So, hey, if you want to be accessible with spammer, try to at least send images with alt text while you're at it, because you're not being accessible on GAAD. So, anyways. I guess one thing I'll talk about real quick is, what if you want to improve your accessibility today? What do you need to do? 1, make your alt text better, right? Work on that. 2, even talk about to everybody else that you're improving your accessibility, getting an accessibility statement that commits your approval of accessibility and saying that you're working on it. And 3, start the process, trying to get an audit or start testing with a screen reader as best as you can, because you've got to start somewhere. And you could also, automated tools are really helpful. All right, I think, guys, this is going to be it. I'm getting overruled by spam bots, so let me go ahead and get out of here before the robots take over. But if you guys have anything constructive to say, I will go ahead and stick around. But otherwise, I think I'm going to go because the spam bots are multiplying. So, yeah, I hope you guys enjoy this. And again, if you would like to, please, and I'm asking you, like, share, comment, subscribe, ring the notification bell, tell your friends. Let's try to get this channel to 1,000. Also, let's get the Twitch to 50 followers. Thank you so much, and happy Global Accessibility Awareness Day.